waiting to come in?
I'll keep an eye on that anyway, but there isn't at the moment.
All right. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Before starting off, I acknowledge that I'm hosting and recording this meeting from the lands of Ghana people. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands which all of you work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this SIMCAFE. And I welcome you all for the SIMCAFE 2.0. It's been a couple of months since we started discussing the reincarnation, or like reinventing the SIMCAFEs, getting that back to life and getting people talking and discussing about various challenges, options, possibilities in the simulations world as a part of giving it back to the community. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Renee Zahnow, Associate Professor in University of Queensland. So she focuses on places, behaviors, and patterns of crime and victimization. And also she's interested about how human mobility, social and behavioral norms would impact the crime and deviance. She's also involved in understanding the application of theory and evidence to achieve community resilience in social cohesion and individual well-being. We had a small catch-up before we started discussing about the SIMCAFEs, and it really got me intrigued when we led to a conversation about immersive experiences and how it can lead into human well-being. So we found that it can be a great topic for us to discuss at the SIMCAFE. So yeah, here we are, and over to you, Dr. Renee.
Thanks, Udi, and thanks everyone for having me along. So today I'm going to have a chat about virtual reality nature and the possibilities for health and well-being. So thank you again for having me along today. And this topic arose because a lot of the work that I do is on communities and about the capacity for public spaces and places where people come together to make people feel better and to make communities operate in a more socially cohesive way. One of the most traditional public spaces where people come together is nature spaces. Usually urban parks is what we think of. So there's a lot of literature that demonstrates that nature is good for our health and hospitals are actually bad for our health. So studies have shown that small amounts of nature, when patients are in a hospital, can actually benefit their health. For example, a study that was conducted many years ago, one of the first in this area, found that when patients were near a window, when they were recovering from gallbladder surgery, they required fewer days in hospital, and also they suffered from less pain and required less medication than those that were not near a window. This led to further research looking at the way that just seeing nature and experiencing nature could have a physiological effect on people's well-being. So what is it about nature that can help people to feel better? Well, before we move into the theories and the research behind this, I want everybody to just sit back and imagine. Imagine being in a hospital or a surgery. Imagine those concrete walls, that sterile environment, and think about how you feel. You start to feel clammy, you start to breathe quickly, and your blood pressure starts to rise. Everything's noisy. Then imagine when you listen to the rain fall on the roof. Imagine hearing the birds or being in a rainforest. The idea of listening to nature, of seeing nature and feeling restored or relaxed isn't a new thing. We've actually been doing this for a long time. So implementing nature into these environments where people are unwell and where we want them to feel relaxed and to have restorative benefits is not a large leap. Some people have started to suggest that we could relax patients prior to having a surgical procedure with the use of VR, and in particular, VR nature experiences. This particular person was suggesting that one way of relaxing patients could even be to take them through their procedure in using VR and take them into the surgery itself. Now, I wouldn't want to see what's happening in my surgery, but I would be relaxed by being in a natural experience while laying in the bed waiting to be taken into surgery. So why nature? As I said, the idea that nature is beneficial for health and well-being and has restorative benefits is not a large leap. We've actually known this for hundreds of years. The public accept this idea. They know that the sounds of nature is relaxing and sights of nature are relaxing. So incorporating VR and immersive technologies is the next step in an already existing restorative health regime. All right, so taking this step isn't that far to go. The restorative effects of nature are scientifically and empirically proven. Studies show that when there are green spaces near schools, this promotes cognitive development of the children. We know that when children can view green spaces, this promotes self-control behaviour. Adults who live near green spaces have better attentional functioning, and exposure to natural environments has been shown to improve working memory, cognitive flexibility, and attentional control. Why is it that nature has these influences on our health and well-being? There are 3 suggested hypotheses for the link between nature and the influence on health and well-being. The first is the biophilia hypothesis. This hypothesis suggests that our ancestors evolved from natural settings. Back in the day, our cave people lived off the land. So human beings have a natural sensibility to be surrounded by the outdoors and to live in natural settings. Therefore, we need the environment and we need an attachment to nature for survival. So we have an innate desire to be connected to a natural environment. The second idea is the stress reduction hypothesis. This suggests that when we spend time in nature, it triggers a physiological response that lowers our cortisol levels. So this is that idea that blood pressure starts to reduce, breathing rates reduce, and we feel an overall sense of restoration or relaxation. And this is usually what people in surveys respond that they get from visiting parks or urban green spaces. They say they feel restored and relaxed. The third hypothesis is about attention restoration theory. This idea is that nature replenishes one's cognitive resources because it restores one's ability to concentrate and their attention. Studies show that when students are surrounded by nature, they actually do better in tests. So they're actually able to concentrate more and focus more, and therefore they do better in thinking and responding to questions. So how could VR be really used in health and well-being if nature itself would probably be better, right? We could all just go outside and be in nature. Well, certainly the evidence suggests that real nature experiences are better than those that we can get through virtual experiences or sound. But the effects of virtual reality, of pictures, of videos, and immersive are almost as strong as the real thing. So what studies have shown is that for those people who are unwell, who have restricted mobility, or who are disabled in some way, can really get the benefits of actually accessing nature outside through virtual reality experiences. For example, a study demonstrated that older people who access virtual reality had the same level of reduction in stress as those people who accessed outdoor experience of nature. Another study examined the difference in virtual reality experiences of nature scenes versus urban scenes to see if people's exposure through VR to these different experiences actually had different physiological effects. What this study showed was that when people experience nature scenes through VR, it actually has a very significant effect on their well-being compared to the urban scenes. As you can see from these graphs, when people experience the urban scenes, afterwards they had a reduction in their energy, that's vigor, and they had an increase in feelings of fatigue. However, when people viewed the VR experiences of nature, they had a reduction in confusion, a reduction in fatigue and tension, a reduction in depression, and overall a reduction in total mood disturbances. So you can see there that there was significant benefits of the VR experience of nature and significant negative impacts of VR experiences of urban scenes. So what the evidence seems to be showing is that virtual reality and immersion should not replace real nature experiences completely. So they're not a complete substitute for those who do have the ability to access them. However, they can improve accessibility for those who are sick or impaired. And for those who might be in settings where they are unwell, we can utilize VR experiences of nature instead of things like medication. When people who had mental health, when people who are hospitalized with bipolar disorder were put near a window and provided sunlight each morning, they required less medication for their mood disorder. So this demonstrates that there may be possibilities of reducing reliance on prescriptive medication simply by introducing experiences of nature into people's lives. Other studies have started to investigate the capacity for VR experiences to assist young people who suffer from autism or other anxiety-provoking disorders because it produces a low stress environment for them to be able to start to practice their social interactions with other people. For example, shared experiences of nature can enhance social connectedness because nature has been found to make people nicer. In immersive nature experiences, people are happier to interact and people are less stressed. These sorts of experiences can be used with people who usually feel a high level of anxiety to practice their social interactions and to start to feel more, more au fait with interacting in public spaces. So what are the key points here? The first one is that spending time in nature is linked to cognitive benefits, improvements in mood, mental health, and emotional well-being. The second one is that virtual experiences, such as watching film, hearing sounds of nature, and being immersed in nature experiences can have similar effects to being in nature, even though the effects are less pronounced. Both green and blue spaces produce wellbeing benefits, but remote and biodiverse spaces may be particularly helpful. And this is where VR could be particularly useful. Even those people in urban spaces, and we are becoming a more and more urbanized society, could have access to more biodiverse spaces through the use of VR. Ecotherapy is also gaining traction. Ecotherapy encourages walking and walking therapy, also the prescription of daylight and encouraging people to get outside. This suggests that the idea of prescribing people nature and prescribing people, the use of nature and things other than medication is starting to gain traction in the medical industry. So what about affordability and access to VR nature? Well, when we start to think about this in terms of prescription, we can start to think about prescribed dosages. Maybe VR headsets or little VR hubs could become available at pharmacies and people could be prescribed a dose. For example, in Norway, people can experience seasonal affective disorder due to the polar nights, and doctors actually can recommend light therapy where people are prescribed time in the sun or to get wavelengths of light from therapy boxes. And VR nature could be prescribed in the same way for people who are suffering from depression or other forms of mental health issues. VR could be made available in fitness centers, like the way that people might go to floating pods or into a sauna for restorative treatment. They could also access VR nature. Mental health facilities and aged care centres could introduce things like an immersive nature room where people could go and sit and interact, as this would benefit their overall health and well-being, and it might reduce the need for extra nursing staff, security, and reliance on medical interventions. Schools could implement these sorts of rooms or VR headsets where problem children or children with particular disorders, such as autism or particular issues, could go and spend time to have a calming effect. The final one is juvenile delinquency centres, where we do know that there are a lot of young people who have mood regulation disorders and have troubles with things like social interaction. By providing them with opportunities to reduce their stress levels and to assist their cognitive function through interventions such as access to nature that do not require more prescription medication, this could be highly beneficial, particularly if it allows for immersive experiences where more than one person can be in there at a time. So they could be doing therapy with it, they could be talking with a therapist or with other people at the same time as being immersed in these relaxing settings. These are just some references. So that concludes the information that I brought along today. I have lots of other things to discuss, but I really wanted to open the floor to everybody to join the discussion and bring some questions to the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Renee. I'll just open the floor for some questions if anyone has any time to speak up. Or I've got some questions here.
Far away, we'll follow.
Yeah, okay. So first question, you did mention about autism and mental health facilities. I'm just interested to see how virtual reality and immersive experiences can There are inherent challenges with virtual reality, which is like motion sickness, and it's a lot to take in if you're really new to it. You just need to work your way through how to navigate in a virtual reality system. How would that affect a person who's really challenged with autism or a disability? That's something which is interesting to really discuss and figure out whether there is any options which you've experienced.
Yep. So one of the things with, one of the big things with virtual reality nature that's been looked at in the past, but then was parked, is the idea of encouraging people to exercise, right? So one of the key things about, health and well-being with virtual reality nature was really about, get people to do trail running and all this sort of thing. But one of the big things was, people get motion sickness. So that was one of the things that they've sort of parked because of that reason. In terms of autism, you're talking about having something around your face, and a lot of autistic children don't like things on their face. What they've found in studies that they've conducted so far is that it's about speaking with the child. So therapy has to be part of it first, right? So in terms of introducing this with the use of VR, and particularly nature therapy through VR with an autistic child, this would have to be introduced one-on-one with a therapist. So it would have to be a tool that therapist would use and bring in one-on-one. If it was in a school setting, it would have to be with a guidance counsellor. And then once the child was used to it, they could go in to a room, and then they know they're getting upset. It could be, at some schools at the moment, they have dogs for this, right? When a child's getting upset, they go and play with the dogs. At my nephew's school, they have 2 dogs that the children can go and play with when they feel themselves getting upset. So it's this similar sort of thing.
Yeah. And another question was just on the immersive experiences. I saw it as not just visual, but it has to be audible. It has to really feed into the 6 senses rather than just being visual. There are experiences around the world which takes you through visual experiences. Yes, you can see, you can experience New York or any other city, but it's just that feeding into all the senses which
Yep.
will take you through that entire journey. I was just thinking, so yeah, it's a really interesting topic. But then the other challenge is the heat and the blue light the screens are gonna emit over a period of time. How would we counter that? Is another topic which I think is interesting.
Yeah, and I think those sorts of challenges are really important. Particularly when we start to think about bringing them into a medical setting, would be, how would it influence other things? But I think in terms of for people who can't access, we think about institutional settings, like particularly old age settings, mental health institutions. I think that this offers a very important way of people to be able to access nature if we can move around these challenges.
Right. Any other questions? Elizabeth, Catherine, any questions from you all?
Renee, you mentioned the issue of people feeling motion sickness, and I certainly have had that experience. How do you address, how do you help people find out whether they do or don't have it before you put them into this? Is it possible?
I don't think it is possible before people get in, although if people tend to experience motion sickness, they're probably going to be more likely to. So one of the big things is just making sure that you ask people, before they get in. And the other thing is as well, they're starting to do a lot more research now on what you need to do to ensure in terms of how quickly you can move from one image to another, and the density shifts in images to ensure that you know, you reduce the likelihood of people having motion sickness. So I went to I've been through a few different VR experiences, and there are certain ways or ones that I think are better and worse for motion sickness.
So what are some of those?
Well, for example, I mean, like, obviously if the person's still, that can actually make it better or worse, right? So if you're sitting stock still, that can actually be worse because everything else is moving around you. So sometimes it's about producing a little bit of movement in the person's own body. Some of the other things is really about making sure that it's not the movements aren't flashing too much, right? So you're not getting changes in have you ever seen like the PowerPoint slides? I think it's called Prezi, where suddenly they have things that move in.
Yeah.
So you're making sure that things move in a way that are layered and not jolting in and out from a far away.
Okay. And I mean the equipment required looks pretty large and expensive. What's likely to be is it going to be, you know, reduced in scale? What's lying ahead for the technology side of it?
Honestly, I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know what lies ahead in the technology side of it. I think, though, that technology is moving pretty quickly.
Mhm.
My sense is that, you know, it won't be that long before these sorts of things, like you think about what's available now in terms of medical devices. So if we think about this, if we change our thinking around this and we change our thinking from VR as being a gaming device to being a medical device, then everything changes, right? Because people don't say, oh, about a medical device, oh, well, we can't really develop that, or it's too expensive or whatever. They say, okay, that's fine, right? Or the government can subsidize that. And you think how much the government subsidizes on things like prescription antipsychotics or mood stabilizers. It's a lot of money. And so when we start to think about the way that we might bring in these sorts of things instead of in the long term, then it becomes, you know, it's just, I think it's a mentality shift.
Okay.
I think in terms of, I'll just contribute to this conversation. I think in terms of technology, it's certainly shifting, and over the last 10 years, the technology has improved really well, and then they've gone into from a wired form to a form factor which is stable on its own, so a standalone system, and now they're implementing a system where they have mixed reality. Now they have mixed reality on standalone systems, so. Technology certainly is shifting, and it can get smaller and smaller, but the real problem and the challenge is how much power can you generate on that standalone system and how effective that's going to be over a long period of time. Currently, a mixed reality, it really depends on the experience that you build in, the technology that you build in, how much power that's sucking in for that particular immersive experience, right? And then that would deplete the battery really quickly. So technology will catch up. It will become more portable and more adaptable into situations. And certainly, as you mentioned, if it's not if it's not looked at as a gaming device, if it's looked at as a medical or a different technological device, then yes, it certainly will advance in that form. But I guess to make it more accessible to people, rather than just a business to business or business to technology adoption purview, it should be like the technology has to take a front of a household commodity, right? It has to be a household commodity so that it can be accessible by a lot of people. Yeah, that's just my sense of it.
And like I will say, like, so last time I was in Europe, so when you go to anything like their museum or their, you know, their their historical things, they've all
Yeah.
got VR experience.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
everywhere.
They do. Yeah.
Like,
And
so it's not that it's can't be done in public spaces, or, you know, that people can't all just put a headset on and walk around and be in it. You know, so I think it is doable.
yeah, technology will certainly catch up. But it will take some time. But certainly on the immersive experiences side, it's not just virtual reality. You can just create immersive experiences through, as you mentioned in the Japanese example, it's just screens. So it's screens, and then you can induce other sensors. Yeah, there you go. So screens, which has, you know, formidable resolution, I guess. And yeah, if you can induce all the other sensors, then you create that immersive experience for that particular environment. And this can be like the forest experience, or this can be like a volcano. Depends on
Wow.
how you want to look at it. Right. The other question I had was, depending on different VR or immersive experiences, have there been any studies with the amount of hormones which we generate, or you know, spikes up, or any research based on that?
So that particular one that I showed you, showing about the, you know, fatigue, etc. So that was actually measuring what was happening with people. So yes, there are so there was another one that was looking at the one that I was talking about, where they had 10 people going into real so they had 10 people that went into real nature experiences and 10 people that went into VR, and they found the reduction in cortisol levels was approximately the same for both. So most of the studies that have been done on VR nature experiences have been things that have been, you know, doing like an experiment, either looking at the people, a comparison group that's going to real nature, or a comparison group that's looking at something else.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice. Any other questions, discussion topics, comments from the audience?
I think it was a really interesting presentation, Renee. Just before I ask the question, could you just skip through to the slide with the references on it?
Yep.
Because that only appeared really quickly. So just so people can get that when the record. Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there I was going to say there are studies showing that you can, I think you mentioned this, replace anesthetic with a VR-based experience, so that people are immersed in some kind of game that's got to be distracting in some way, so that they're not just lying there. But it's been shown to reduce the amount of anesthetic they need, and I think you also pointed out the reduction in the requirement for painkillers if they're provided with some kind of experience like that post-op, and that can make a huge difference to the amount of drugs that are required and potential side effects that come from that. So it's got a whole bunch of corollary benefits to just reducing the amount of chemicals that are put into the body.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, like, when you think about, you know, by purchasing one VR machine and utilizing that on a single patient, right? Because they can be used more than on one patient. Then what would be the benefits long term, right? So when you think about cost benefit, then, you know, you could save on many patients. And when you think about it, what some of these studies have shown with nature, just simply with having pictures on the wall of nature, they've reduced the amount of pain relief patients need. So when you think about being completely immersed, reducing pain relief, and then that's long term. And we know that, like, some people who receive a lot of pain relief also have ongoing complications with that, because it can impact your guts. Some people become mentally dependent. Like, there's a lot of other issues that can occur. So I think that there is, you know, when we think about cost benefit, there's certainly, we come out on top with this.
absolutely. I think that probably a PhD in that to come up with those numbers, right?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think it'd make a pretty compelling case. And just in terms of the costs, I mean, the headset costs are coming down. You can get a reasonably good VR headset for about $300 or $400 these days. For gaming, might not quite have the resolution that you might want for this kind of application, but yeah, the costs are coming down rapidly, and the capabilities are going up nearly as fast. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot easier to apply this.
And, you know, like when you think about it in a setting like an aged care facility, like if you had an immersive nature experience room in an aged care facility, right, it might seem expensive to set up, but you think about the number of problems that they have in aged care facilities, right? And you could take people in there, and the mental health and well-being of those patients would just be immensely better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You may want to tap into the Maggie Beer Foundation, Renee.
Oh, yeah.
She's had something going on in the ABC the last 3 weeks, but she's been working on improving feeding aged care people.
Okay.
And she's been conducting a series of experiments. I think the Uni of Tasmania is actually doing the numbers in terms of health impacts on diet, etc. But
Okay, I
part of
will.
the process is to create gardens where they cook their own, you know, herbs and plants and things, and bring that in. So there's a little bit of a tie in there. So yeah, just might be interested.
Yes, that's fantastic. That'd be great. Thank you for that.
Another thing I'm interested in is, and I know what you're doing is developing front end of something, but have you considered implementation at all?
No, I haven't. I guess this really for me was kind of like my interest was really started with being accessibility of green spaces in real life. And then when I started doing this research because my interest is really in communities and people getting out and being together, and where do they do that? So then it was in green spaces. And then when I started doing this research and I was out in green spaces, Corona hit. And it was like, so what do people do when they can't access green space, right? Well, they can't access nature, because all these people were saying, I'm here I'm here to talk to people and see other people, feel part of something, but I'm really here for relaxation and restoration. I want to be around trees and I want to be outside. And so it was like, what do people do when they can't access nature? And it was like, well, okay, perhaps something is around VR. And I started looking into this idea, and then what VR can do, and thinking about the way that, you know, VR could provide an avenue for people who can't access nature to be able to do so. So I haven't really been able to think about the implementation so much, as more about what is the possibilities, and the need, right? Like I really do think that there is a need, particularly because I've spent time with others in mental health care facilities, and also people who have been in like long-term hospital care. And I do feel like there is a real need for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Just a comment in the chat. John Welsh, his microphone's not working, so he typed into the chat. I wanted to reference Professor Bob Stone from the UK. He's a very, very well-known expert in the kind of VR, AR, XR space, and the benefits and disadvantages or issues that need to be addressed in making that kind of stuff work. So if anyone's interested in looking into some more technical details, he's a great resource to tap into.
Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, brilliant. I think we've got a lot of questions, had a bit of great discussion. Thank you, Dr. Renee, for all that information, and thanks for being here. We've got an interesting session coming up in August. Phil, if you want to share that image I shared with you.
Yep. I will
Want me to stop share?
It's okay. I can just do that.
Okay, so there's one question on the chat that's coming through. Abigail. Hi, Abigail.
Hi, Renee. Great
Hi,
talk.
Abby.
Hi. Okay. Well, my question is, well, I was having a look at your reference list, and I didn't see anything about VR as a tool to fight recidivism in the younger like the juvenile offenders. So I was wondering if you maybe have an example or two of a successful VR program that's been rolled out anywhere in
Oh,
the world.
no, it hasn't. I mean, this is just an idea. At the moment, we're trialing the creative writing stuff, but it hasn't been into a VR or anything like that. They do use VR currently for lifers who are going back into the world in the US. So they have programs currently where like people who have been in for 20 years or more, they use VR to go into the world. So for example, if you've been in prison for over 20 years, going back into the world is very different. So they learn how to shop, how to go about the world, using VR headsets. You can look it up on YouTube and have a look at lifers practicing real world using VR. It's really amazing to see because some of these people, like when they got locked up, they say like everyone had to have cash, and now one of them says, when I came in here, it was for armed robbery, and now they're going to let me just walk out of the shop on my own, like, and trust me to buy my own groceries because, you know, now it's all self-service. So yeah, they do use VR in those settings.
Oh, thanks. I will read up on it.
No
Very interesting.
problem.
And I'm just wondering, the Japanese room that isn't VR but is screens, I'm assuming that's sort of a video movement of forest. What do people do while they're in there?
They sit in it.
And talk, or
It's a
just
public space.
it's just
Yes,
a public.
they can talk, they can do whatever they want in there. And so it's a public space where they can access nature. So it's like instead of an urban park, right? So it's in a highly densified area.
Of Tokyo, or in Tokyo, or one of the other cities?
One of the other cities.
Oh, okay.
So, and so I think like whilst these things aren't, you know, they're not the be all and end all. I think that they're options.
Okay. And where are you taking your research next?
At the moment, I'm actually trying to get a grant to do a comparative study between here and Japan on accessibility of green space. So just thinking about how people are accessing green space in real life, and then what their understanding of green space is. Because before we can move to the VR, I guess I need to better understand, you know, is this something that all cultures understand the same in terms of nature? Because unfortunately, one of the things about our understandings of the benefits of nature is it's from a very white European understanding. So like we know that people find nature restorative and that there's all these benefits, but all the samples have kind of been like white Europeans. We don't have a lot of different experiences from around the world to draw on. So I just want to get a little bit more of an idea about different cultural experiences of nature and what is the most important things about nature that make it restorative and relaxing.
Okay, good luck. It sounds like a pretty big task.
Thank you.
Should keep you well and truly occupied.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions coming up? Nope. All right. So next session is on the 29th of August, Bantari VR. They are a VR company based in Australia. They are providing VR procedural training tools for the healthcare sector. So we'll catch up with them on the 29th of August. They'll explain what their challenges are, how they're going about their business, and what sort of problems they're solving in the healthcare industry using VR procedural trainers. They've been quite successful in the Australian market and recently tapped into the US market. So it'll be an interesting session.
Thanks, Udi.
Thanks,
All
Udi.
right.
Thanks
And-
for
Yeah.
having me.
Well, thanks,
No
Renee.
problem.
It's been
Thank
a
you,
great
Renee.
start to a whole new cycle of SIMCAFEs.
Yes,
And
yes.
we're
great
looking
Yeah.
forward to
Thank you.
the next
Looking
few
forward to all the
speakers.
12 sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Right,
Have a
take
nice
care, everyone.
weekend.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.